Okay, we're playing against G Panda. Knight to f3. Let's see what they play. Are we going to get another e5? I doubt it. They're thinking knight c6 is an invitation into going for e4. But we are not going e4 here because they wanted to go back into e4, e5. If they want to play e5, then they totally can. We'll just play our normal d3, bishop g2, and castle setup. And I think we're happy. So this feels a little too early, unfortunately, for them. I think what's going to happen is we're going to take on e4. They're going to probably take with the pawn. We're going to trade queens. And knight g5. If bishop f5 to defend, we have knight c3. And they probably will have to play e3 to trade c2 for e4. So it's take. Take. And now knight to g5. Bishop to f5. And knight to c3. Oh, so they didn't do that. Okay, now knight takes e4 is just a clean pawn. So that's the problem with pushing e4 too early. And these lines here. Which is a good thing to note. Also, it's not just that we are up a pawn. The structure is already damaged. And this feels like it's probably winning by now, actually. Now we have the bishop pair as well. So all we got to do is kind of just play normally. And we should win. There's a consideration here. Do we take on c6 or not? I think I will. I had to think about it for a second. But I'm following advice that I gave earlier, which is avoid imbalances that are unnecessary when you're up material. Now, of course, giving up the bishop pair is kind of a weird thing because it does decrease potentially our advantage, as the bishop pair is generally an advantage itself. But since we're up a material advantage of a pawn already, and when we look at the resulting structure, they have the worst possible structure you can get in a position, actually. They have every single pawn is isolated, and 4 of those isolated pawns are doubled isolated pawns, which are known to be extremely weak. So not only are we a pawn up, but arguably we're more than that, just because of the weaknesses that we discussed. Now we could go rook d7 immediately, and I do like this move. Is there anything else to consider? I don't think so. I think we can just go rook d7. Yeah, and unfortunately for them, they defended c7 or f7, but not c7. Instead, rook c8 was maybe better, but then we pick up f7 and probably h7 as well. So rook takes c7 here. Looks like it's lights out. Let's go back to d7. Not being special, just playing normal moves. And now we have b4 as a threat. b4, the bishop is actually trapped on the square. If we notice, the bishop can't move here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, without being lost, of course. So when we notice these things, we should ask, okay, what if we attack it? And of course, b4 attacks it and wins the bishop. So that would be good for us. I'm not really interested in trading into like a rook ending because I feel like there's more chances to come back. Objectively, this would still be completely lost because our rook is much more active than theirs. But I'm a little happy to avoid the rook ending specifically. If we can trade the rooks instead, and it's a bishop ending, this feels a lot easier to win. First off, bishop e3 would immediately win the game because it would trade into a king on pawn ending where we're up 2 pawns. And even if we damage our structure, which normally we wouldn't want to do if we're like up like 1 pawn, then that might neutralize the advantage a bit. But here, yeah, the advantage is actually just too big. So I'm going to play e3. It looks really weird because our bishop, we're taking squares away from it, but we're just being defensive. And yeah, we can play like this. Now they have f8. That's why I didn't play b4 there. Yeah, I'm going to trade into the ending. And we're going to see how to win one of these positions when you're just up just a little bit of material. So I'm going to start with the move G4. Why G4? That looks weird. It looks like it's weakening our structure. It doesn't matter because there's not really a good way to exploit it. And the idea of G4 is to prevent H5 or F5 getting more space in the center. And I want to bring my king up to E4 where F5 won't be possible. So if I play king F3 and they played F5 earlier, well, then I'd have to play something like E4 or G4 then. But now, when I play G4, F5's completely stopped. So now when I play king F3, as we see now, I have a plan of moving my bishop and bringing my king even further in. And it's not really able to be prevented. So if H5 or F5, we could just take it. Generally, you want to not put pawns on the same color of your bishop if it's a same color bishop ending, but the thing is when you're up this much material, there's some things you can do differently. So they might be going for this pawn. Not really concerned about that. I like this move here. This move is aimed towards playing C4. Check. And forcing them backwards. And the idea now is if they go E5 or D6, I think no matter what, we can play bishop D4. I want to be a little bit careful if they played king E5 because maybe we're giving them too much activity. Here, bishop D4 is just completely lights out because we're taking F6 if they do not trade. And this is just a huge problem for them because, well, you know, look at things, right? We just won an extra pawn. We're up 3 pawns now. Bishop D7 is kind of a cheeky move. We're threatening bishop F8, trying to go into an ending, which they can't really allow. And king E4, getting a little bit more space. Again, you want to activate your king in these types of positions. And now bishop F8 wins the bishop. Not even exchanges it, it wins the bishop. Yeah, and that's game. So I think maybe there was a way to improve on our play there. We'll have to see. Maybe bishop takes c6 was completely unnecessary. Here, it felt really good for us. Knight to g5. I was expecting bishop to f5, and this is what I was discussing before, is bishop f5 and knight c3. They could try something like e3. But I think the exchange of the pawns here, if they take c2, is just... They're losing a lot of time in a position like this. Like, let's just say they go back. Now we already have threats like knight b5, and it looks like it's unstoppable to just not lose material. Like, it looks like we're winning material by force anyways, just by the fact that every single one of our pieces is doing something, whereas they have a knight on d8, a rook on a8, bishop on is not developed, and this rook isn't developed either, right? But instead they went into this, knight to g5, knight c6, giving up the pawn, which probably objectively is a better decision. And knight takes f6, g takes f6. I played c3, looks like it was correct. The reason I played c3 instead of c4 is because it gives the knight options, right? They all of a sudden have moves like knight d4, and now we have to play actually knight c3, allowing, you know, complicated moves like knight c2. Of course, we're winning because bishop takes b7 and bishop c6 stuff. But if we didn't have that, like, we have to see ahead of time that we have that. Why don't we just play c3 where this knight's just dominated? And that's kind of the problem with putting a knight on c6 in general, or a knight on c3. If we put a knight on c3, like move 1, right? Oh, it's not letting me move a knight there. Let's just pretend here we play c3 instead. This isn't a bad move to consider. Of course, the computer's not going to like it because it's not like really developing things. But it does kind of dominate the knight a bit, right? So that's why c3 was played, is just for that exact reason of just kind of dominates this piece a bit. So bishop takes b1, rook takes b1, bishop c5. I took on c6. It looks like we didn't have to. But also computer didn't hate it, so it doesn't really matter to me. Rook fd1, takes. King b7, rook d7. I'm wondering if potentially in the endgame something was allowed here. Maybe around this position. But it doesn't look like it, does it? No. No. Everything looks totally fine. Yep. Looks like a win. From every angle. Originally, the computer said I blundered somewhere, and I'm struggling to find out where. Maybe it was earlier in the opening? Like around here? Yeah, maybe it was around here. Or after knight f6, castles. I'm struggling to see where. That's okay. That's fine. Not a big deal. Because it looks like it was kind of unimportant. Because by now we're winning, and the game did end in that way. So that's going to cover it for this game.